I'm Chris Bussing. Welcome to my channel. It's committed to helping more people create lives of freedom and impact through success in tech sales and the pursuit of self-development. And it's brought to you by Tech Sales Accelerator, your blueprint to break into tech sales in the next 12 weeks. We've got an amazing guest today, Leslie Venetz. She is a multi-time sales leader. She is a keynote speaker, and she's even a founder. She's done it all, and she has a proven track record, and she coaches and trains some of the top sellers out there in the industry. So today's a unique opportunity to dig into modern outbounding. This time of year, we all need to generate some pipeline to be on track to hit our numbers. And so in this conversation, we're going to learn why outbounding and prospecting has become difficult, mistakes people make and how to avoid those, as well as tips to be really great at cold emailing, LinkedIn. We might even talk about cold calling, and we'll see where else the conversation dances to. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give that like button a love tap, because the YouTube algorithm loves that too. And we'll share this video with 2 more people who could benefit from the message, and share this with others that could benefit. And finally, I encourage you to take notes, watch this a few times, and then translate the concepts into action to produce your own success, and then celebrate it in the comments on YouTube and with Leslie by connecting with her on LinkedIn and sending her a message. Okay, Leslie, that's my song and dance. Thank you so much for being here. How's your day going?
Oh, my pleasure. And I love that you immediately started by saying, do the things you learn. Because you can input all of this great information, but if you don't take the time to apply it and see what actually works in your particular type of sale, then what are we really doing here, folks? So I absolutely love that call to action.
Amen. I feel like learning through doing is so important in sales and entrepreneurship. When you got into tech sales for the first time, into sales in general, but did you start in tech sales? Were you in tech sales?
I didn't.
Okay,
no.
See, I just assumed. I assumed. So that wasn't the case. What was your journey? Let's go there.
Yeah, I started in a much more traditional sales job in professional services. So I worked for a global business intelligence company, and then I worked for a branding agency, an audio branding agency, then back into business intelligence, and then I started transition and I worked for a platform as a service company. And so it was the whole like recurring revenue song and dance. People were buying access to a platform software, but also it was like platform plus service. So I came into full-fledged SaaS much later in my career, which I have to admit, Chris, at first it made me have like some imposter syndrome, maybe. Particularly because SaaS sales is so gatekept by language, where we have really fancy words for saying kind of simple things. And it turned out to be one of my superpowers because I had sold to so many different types of ICPs, from like a transactional one call close through to multi-month, if not multi-year, like 6-figure plus consultative sales, every different department, and being able to take those learnings and apply them to SaaS to figure out what actually has fit for purpose instead of just doing the playbook drag and drop has been a gift.
Wow. You know, it's funny. I have had the opposite journey where I started at Oracle selling software, but it was a database, the platform and cloud infrastructure. Then I went to Google Cloud selling their infrastructure, their platforms, their data analytics. Now I've been at a services company for the past 4 years, a cloud services company that helps implement data analytics, business intelligence, and things. And is that in the realm of what you were selling originally? Was it a consultancy that helped companies adopt relevant technology to drive their data and BI strategy? Or like,
no, it wasn't even tech specific. I mean, it was pretty diverse. So I owned the CFO product portfolio, and then I owned the energy product portfolio in that first job. So even within the 2 like product lines that I was owning, talk about different. In the morning, I would be, on the phone with CFOs from New York of like, Fortune 250 CFOs.
Oh, wow.
And in the afternoon, I'd be talking to Bobby down in, Arkansas or something. So
yeah, I can picture Bobby in Arkansas. I got a prospect out in Arkansas that I need to get a hold of. So
yeah, I learned very, very early on how to do some of those sales skills like mirroring and really flexing my curiosity to understand how different types of people wanted to buy different types of products. But yeah, it was, I mean, we had some products that we sold to the like CIO, CISO, CTO, but even those weren't tech stack specific. So when I found my way to SaaS, it was really an evolution of having sold a lot of different products to a lot of different types of people before I sold a tech first solution.
Wow. So you revealed a couple insights that selling to many types of ICPs across industries, even in a non-tech sales role, can be very useful as you get into technology sales. And also you alluded to being a chameleon and being able to mirror different people and adapt to their personality styles and being curious as core drivers of success in sales. And I've definitely seen that to be the case. Is there any other fundamental qualities that are needed for some of my audience who are the aspiring SDRs breaking into tech and sales for the first time, or even like AEs who want to reinforce the qualities that matter and how they want to show up? Like, what are some of those absolute necessary qualities to crush it in sales?
Yeah, two things. One, I believe that in any sales role selling any product, the most foundational skill is active listening. And I don't care if you are selling $1 million SaaS product or you are selling a comb at a kiosk in the mall. Like active listening, making people feel seen and feel heard. Right. That is the most foundational sales skill. And I think one of the things that I hear when I am talking to folks that are trying to break into tech sales, and maybe they came from a non-traditional background like I did, and they're having trouble with, finding somebody that'll give them a chance, or maybe they came from something totally different, they will share that they don't feel like they have relevant transferable skills. And I'd love to hear your take on this too, because when I think about who I hire and who my top performers have been, it's rarely that they are a top performer because they previously sold the exact same product or even to the same ICP. They are a top performer because they are curious, because they genuinely like to help, because they are a great active listener, because they have good rigor around things like their territory strategy or their research strategy. And those are skills that many people have probably done, maybe not worded the same way we do in SaaS, but that they have done in some capacity in other roles.
Yeah, and maybe they've got courage to pick up a phone and interrupt a stranger's day to present an opportunity because they know they can help. And that's cold calling, and that's something that people can transfer. They've probably shown courage in other roles and other industries. And I think you're hitting at the crux of a challenge for most people. Is there's some degree of imposter syndrome when breaking into tech sales for the first time, simply because that is natural when you've never done something before, like selling tech sales. But I feel like a key to managing that imposter syndrome showing up anyways and making it happen is asking yourself, am I capable? Can I really do this? And by asking that question, realizing hopefully that I have transferable experience, and it's helpful to hear from you, like what you look for into someone who would hire to, for individuals out there to do that introspection, to kind of, map out and sift through their experience to find the qualities they need to demonstrate. And by the way, I threw in like a kind of nugget subtly from one of my guests, Dan Pink, who I was privileged to have on the podcast. And in his book, yeah, I actually had him on.
That's incredible, Grant.
It took me talk about prospecting over a year, and referencing the warm synergy. I went to Georgetown University, and one professor, he's not there anymore, that would help people write books. This authoring program would get Dan Pink's mail by accident. He's his neighbor. And I brought that at a warm synergy and followed up for a year. Dan at first said, hey, I'm working on other projects. But it's funny how prospecting is such a transferable skill, even to podcast guests, And so I bring up Dan because we dove into To Sell as Human, and in preparation, I read the whole book, of course. And he talked about Bob the Builder being quite inspiring. He says, can we fix it? And when you ask an interrogatory question, that's actually more motivating. Like, can I do this? Can I break into tech sales? Than trying to force it and amp yourself. Like, I'm amazing. And so anyways, I'm going on a tangent and I want to turn it back over to you.
No, I love it because you said courage earlier. Yeah. And it's that courage, that grit where you're like, do I have the grit? Do I have the courage to show up to something knowing that it might be a bit humbling at first because I'm going to have to learn a lot of new language and some new skill sets and maybe a new industry. But do I have that grit, that courage, the tenacity to do it? And if you're saying yes to that, you probably belong in tech sales.
Absolutely. And it's, again, that subtle thing of asking yourself a question, which sounds weird. Can I do this? Will actually get your brain almost subconsciously to collect evidence that you can, which is what Dan says according to his studies. But do you have any other tips on kicking imposter syndrome and the you-know-what to just in general, whether you're breaking into tech sales for the first time, going from SDR to AE, you're taking the leap to start your consultancy and speaking business like you have done? How do you beat imposter syndrome?
Over preparation.
Oh, that's a good insight.
Yeah, that is where so much of my confidence comes from, is just feeling so prepared. And that's something that any of us have the power to do. So I can share a couple of examples of how I've done that throughout my career. So earlier in my career, I aggressively took every free sales course I could find, and I preferred certification programs because I felt like instead of just saying, oh, I took an online course, I was like, I'm certified in HubSpot, blah, blah, blah. I'm certified in having learner-centered conversations, whatever it is. I did like the Udemy's, the edX, the Coursera's, HubSpot, like you name it. I bet you I've taken 30 or 40 of those courses. And so that gave me a tremendous amount of confidence, both because I would show up to the course not knowing how well I understood the content, and almost every single time being like, oh, you know what this is. You maybe just don't have the language to explain it the way it's being explained in like corporate or industry standard terms. So it felt really empowering, and it really built my confidence, and it certainly really built my like skill sets and mindsets. And that's accessible to anybody that's trying to break into sales. Think about going into an interview and you have the confidence knowing you just took these 5 certifications and can talk about what you learned and can show how proactive, can show that grit. Later in my career, I see it show up in like the amount of practice I do. And I use the word practice very intentionally, because thinking about something like active listening, I practice it. I know it's a skill set. So I practice it by meditating. I practice it by reading books about it. I practice it by doing exercises. And those are things that I might not have thought of or felt were as accessible earlier in my career. But now I'm like, okay, you got to go to the next level. You need to master some of these, I think that's still a foundational skill set, but let's all admit it's a really, really hard one. So it is this, right? It's this process of continuous improvement that I put myself on to continue to practice. And even like, I don't know if I had a LinkedIn post last week that did pretty well, where I talked about how I spent $35,000 on myself last year investing in continuous improvement. Wow. Right? I was shocked when I was doing
that's what happened. You were doing all the free stuff, but then you crushed it in business and sales, and then you could afford the 35,000 and crush it. Like that's cool. That's a good sign you're heading in the right direction.
Definitely. Like I did the free stuff when that was what was available to me at the income I was making and where I was at in my career. And the better I have done in my career, the more I've advanced, the more money I have spent on myself. And 35K is definitely a record year. But
congratulations. What a signal of growth and expansion.
And it's also like I got to hire a friend who started a coaching program. I got to buy courses from some of our other, like LinkedIn favorite creators. So it's also this cool opportunity to get to invest in and support and learn from like your creators' favorite creators. So it was incredible. This year I already spent, it's like at the beginning of February when we're having this conversation, and I already spent 13 grand on a program to synthesize and gain extra clarity on my brand and my content and my presentation craft. And those are all things I'm really good at, but I want to get better. And the only way to do that is to invest and to practice.
Practice is everything. And even heading into this conversation, I get a little nervous sometimes with my intro. And today I felt great, but it's partly because I like practice, it's like a little spiel. And I'm like, you know what makes a good intro? And, actually what's funny is I'm using ChatGPT more. And it's amazing how good a teacher ChatGPT is. Like, how do you do a good intro hook? And practicing that, role playing for, cold calling. Like I'm an account executive still. And, I realized I want to make some more cold calls to make some things happen. And we'll talk about that more later today, but actually role playing and practicing. And I had another great guest like yourself, Marcus Chan, and he told a story about driving in the car to work, and he would role play both as himself and the prospect, making different voices, which sounds like a crazy person in the car. So I just wanted to hit on the theme of practice as it relates to sharpening your sales saw, especially for the early sellers, the SDRs and the AEs. I mean, obviously you can be role playing. Are there any thoughts you have on how to actually put in practice and preparation in the sales world?
Yeah, role playing for sure. I know it can feel cringy. I mean, still to this day, over 15 years into my sales career, listening to my own voice when I am listening back to calls still kind of gives me the icks. So it doesn't go away, but that type, right? But getting that type of real-time feedback in role playing or listening back to your calls, because often you can pick up where you wish you would have asked an extra question or would have not interrupted and listened more, whatever it is. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to create that self-feedback funnel. But one thing that I will say, and this is going to be an unpopular opinion, Chris, scripts. People get so angry about scripts, and I am not saying that you should show up and be like, hello, my name is Leslie Venetz. We're not telling you to read a script like a robot. But when you think about earning the right to your prospect's time on a cold call or on a discovery call, you better show up extremely, extremely prepared on a cold call, being able to really dial in those first few seconds to make sure they're relevant, have a point of view, have questions crafted where you aren't saying, so what keeps you up at night? You're saying, based on your CEO's statement, based on this piece of research, based on the conversations I've had with 4 other CIOs this week, I'm assuming, whatever the priority or whatever the challenge is. So I think that coming with some sort of script where you're not going to be reading it verbatim, but you're extraordinarily confident that you have that call opener, that set of questions, or those buyer-centric outcomes you want to achieve really, really dialed in is paramount. And that's all stuff that you can practice. If I ask them this question, how do I think they would respond? If they respond this way, what would I ask next? So those are things that you can think through and sort of write out, and maybe do a Marcus Chan 2 voice role play with.
Picture it. Hey, this is Marcus calling from Oracle. Hi, I don't know. So that was a horrible invitation, but okay.
No, I can totally picture it though.
This conversation has been too fun, and we've danced to some great topics. I knew it would be unpredictable where we head, and it's all been so great. And I realized this audience loves actionable prospecting tips, and you brought us to a perfect segue to talk about cold calling. And then I'd love to go to just as a roadmap to cold email and LinkedIn, because I know you're great at that as well. So scripts are really important. And after this video, I feel amped up to kind of relook at my own script for cold calling. But can we work through a cold call script together? Starting with an intro, or when they pick up, what you might say to open the call. And then you already hit on based on research, it seems like a kind of maybe a value prop, but we could go to that again, and then maybe setting the meeting, and then maybe look at objections. Is that cool?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go. How do you think about opening the call?
I think about structuring every segment of the call in a way that earns me a right to a little bit more of their attention and time.
Oh, I like that.
fundamental mentality when I am thinking about cold calls. So I only do relevant reason for the call openers. I never do permission-based openers.
Oh, curveball.
I know people love them. They really gross me out. I just
like
can't.
that this is different. So, okay, you don't do like, hey, Leslie, this is Chris calling from Bespin. I realize I'm interrupting your day. So before I go any further, do you have 15 seconds for me to tell you why I'm calling?
No,
you don't like that, to ask
I
for
don't.
permission. Tell me your thoughts behind that.
Yeah, I think it's disrespectful to the prospect, which is really the hottest take, right? I know, Chris. So here's two things. One, I have the data, and the data unequivocally shows that relevant reason for the call works better. So just simply, if you're following the data, do relevant reason for the call. I also think that the reason that we do permission-based openers, we as sellers, is because it makes us feel better.
Mind blown.
And so when you hear people push back on, well, whatever opener people are most confident in is the one they should use, I agree. Like, right tone and confidence is often more important than the exact words coming out of our mouth.
Yeah.
But is the reason that you're confident in a permission-based opener simply because it makes you feel less guilt, less intrusion? Or is it because you actually think a permission-based opener is the best way to deliver immediate value to the person you're calling?
Wow, that's so good. And this comes down to a fundamental theme that I had to learn early in my career, which it's not about how I feel. It's about like, how do I make the prospect feel? It's not about how I want to communicate, but how do they want to be communicated with? And you're saying for that reason, the permission-based opener is typically about making us feel good. It's not necessarily what the customer wants, which is maybe to get to the point faster.
Yeah. And a perfect example of how this shows up in sales messaging is emails that start with, I hope you're well.
Oh, I've done that.
Right?
I mean, of course I've done it, because we've
all done it.
But the secret is I actually don't hope that. No, I'm kidding. I do hope they're well, but
I hope this finds you unwell. But if you think about it, nobody's saying, I hope this finds you well because they think they're delivering a crazy amount of value to the person. They're doing it because it makes them feel a little bit better. So when we think about cold calls, the way I like to build them, if we're stacking those, like we're earning the right at every segment, is the first 8 to 10 seconds is going to be that relevant reason for the call. If you have any social proof you can use, that is my favorite way to open a call. Hey, Chris, working with ABC fencing and XYZ gutters on pertinent priority, a pertinent topic that you're pretty sure is going to be relevant to them. That's fairly compelling, right?
So real quick, let's dig into that.
Yeah.
ABC Gutters, is that like a partner company, the prospect you're reaching out to, or a peer in their industry? Like, do you know they're connected, or like, why is that? Obviously that must create some warmth and familiarity, which is highly effective. So what's going on there? Yeah.
So when I'm talking about social proof, I'm talking about look-alike companies. So this is not a referral. This is not a partner of theirs. This is not somebody they know. It is saying, you are LMNOP sod company. And I'm then going to reference maybe like it's geography specific. So I'm going to say I'm working with this fencing company and this gutter company that are also based in Nashville, Tennessee. Because I'm building a lot of familiarity by talking about these look-alike accounts. And we all know this because we've experienced this even as B2C buyers. One of our biggest fears is messing up, making the wrong purchase, making a mistake, being duped. Like, those are fears all of us hold. And those are fears that our buyers hold in B2B as well. So social proof has a double impact of both making them want to give you a little bit more attention because they're like, oh, well, what is happening with those lookalike accounts? And also immediately lowering that zone of resistance because two other people that are similar to them already trusted you. So it sends this subconscious cue that there's less of a risk in continuing the conversation and and considering you as a vendor. So
I love that. Oh my gosh, this is so good. And I love that you have just a different approach. like cold calling, where I've had 120 guests, maybe the Dan Pinks of the world, all these names, and I'm hearing some different stuff, some pattern interrupts from you, which is great. Now,
I love it. I have made like over 250,000 cold calls myself personally.
You have? Oh my God. I got to catch up to you. Dang, that's amazing.
I got the nicest compliment from somebody on TikTok. I talked about that and they were like, yeah, right. There's no possible way.
Okay.
Like, why? It's like not that many calls over the course of my career. And he pushes back.
Wait, okay.
Like, what? So you make like 500 calls a day? And I was like, oh my God, do you think I'm in my 20s?
So
thank you.
I thought you were 29 or something like that. So Leslie, this like titles are everything when we float this out in the YouTube sea.
Yeah.
So how many, I got to write this down. How many cold calls over how many years? Like, I don't know. That could be fun to like put in the title.
Yeah.
Like a thumbnail. Like
over 250,000 cold calls.
Wow.
For sure. I mean, the teams that I've managed have, I should do the math on that, Chris. I bet you
that's a good point.
Yeah, I bet you it's like over 10 million.
Oh my gosh.
Like
I'm just going to take a note.
Calls.
I'm really having fun, by the way. Like, as you know, I'm also building my brand like you are. It's a big focus this year. And with YouTube, which is my core channel, you know, oh gosh, it's amazing how important marketing is, and little things like spending a lot of time on the title and the thumbnail. And the reason that matters, the marketing and sales, is because you could have a great message like our conversation that will help people be more successful, but we do it a disservice. If it's not marketed well, it won't reach as many people. And so anyways, and that's amazing. 10 million calls impacted. So I'm going to bring us back into this intro. You're quickly referencing social proof to make it familiar, because
that's my favorite relevant reason for the call. If you don't have social proof, it doesn't, like if you don't have lookalike accounts to drop, maybe you're like just a brand new startup or something, you can still create some sort of social proof because you're still talking to people. Right? Like you're still having sales conversations. So you can say, you know, I talked to 3 VPs of sales last week and all of them told me X. And
I like that.
Right. You can play with
tailoring to the persona.
Totally.
So you have value there. You're talking to their peers in the industry, so they might want to hear what you're saying.
Yes. And I am a huge fan of non-contact specific personalization, meaning I don't ever build impact statements that are like, unless I'm doing an ABM or like a key accounts campaign, but if like a general, like some sort of outbound that needs to scale, I'm never going to build impact statements that are like, I saw you on a podcast, I read your LinkedIn post, because that takes so much research before doing cold outbound. I'm always going to favor high relevance. So let's go back to the example where I'm talking
let's get back into it.
ABC fencing and XYZ gutters. Any other lookalike account, which, you know, maybe in Nashville, there's 48 of them that would be some sort of lookalike. All 48 of those companies can get put in the same sequence with highly relevant content, and all of them can get the opener. So you can bang through calls, and back to practice, you can really practice and get into the flow and nail that call opener. So we're going to assume you've nailed it in that first 8 to 10 seconds, which means you've earned maybe 30 more seconds.
So how do you, by the way, you mentioned the social proof of the other companies, and then what we help them. Could you just say it like to lead us to where we are now of earning the next? Can you say it like, all the way through?
Hi, Chris, Leslie calling. If I'm calling a small business type of persona, I'm going to say my company name. If I'm calling a C-suite Fortune 500 company, I probably won't say my company name. So I'm going to skip right to my social proof. So like, hi, Chris, Leslie calling from blah, blah agency. I work with ABC fencing and XYZ gutters on, and then what you're going to say on is that like the thing that you are highly certain is relevant to this other company you're calling. Okay. So maybe it's like on like having a website that keeps their field teams calendars always full because so many leads come in or something. Like
something that ultimately ties to like driving revenue for the business, reducing cost, risk, time.
Some sort of outcome that's going to be important to them, 100%. And then I'm going to go straight into an impact statement. And when we think about impact statement, it's going to be really short, like no more than 30 seconds, 45 seconds. And the impact statement needs to be what is impactful to them. So when we talk about what not to do, we talk about what's impactful to us. I'm your sales executive. Our company does. Our product does.
We're so great. We have these recognitions.
They don't care. They don't care. They don't care that you were in G2. They don't care you won an award. They do not care that you have offices in 32 states. They do not care at this point in the conversation. You have simply not earned the right to ask them to give a heck about you. So we want to continue that dialogue. So we've said we're working with these two lookalike companies on this topic. We're just going to say something else about that that's impactful. And then this is where you put in a little bit of that permission and you do it to validate that you're on the right track. And all of this is happening in like the first 45 seconds of the call, folks. So this is moving really fast. And the validation might be like I just want to make sure, like, let's say it's back to the website contact. Like, I just want to make sure that y'all are driving leads to your field reps through your website, right?
Oh, you're right? Like checking in. Is this the case?
Yeah.
How are you guys?
Yeah, like an assumptive, validating question, something you're pretty sure they're going to say yes to, but you also want to pause and like give them the chance to be like, no, please leave me alone, because you you don't want to be harassing somebody if they want to hang up the phone on you. So you don't you want to be careful to not bulldoze. So you do have to give them a chance. You do have to pause and give them a chance to speak early on. But what the data shows and what I have found in my 250,000 cold calls and my team's 10 million cold calls is that if you stack a relevant reason for the call that earns you the right to another 30 seconds so you can get out an impact statement, you keep that impact statement focused on what is relevant to them, and then you immediately follow that up with a assumptive question to validate that you're getting it right. That tight 45 seconds usually earns you another 3 minutes. And in that 3 minutes, that's where you start asking them questions. And we had talked about this earlier. That's where you want to have that script of really tight questions that you've practiced and you've thought about how they might answer and how you might answer back, and maybe do your split personality role play.
Yeah.
I just saw some new data that I think was from Orem that said the average length of a cold call in 2024 that resulted in a meeting was 6 minutes.
Wow.
Longer than I thought it would be, right? What did you think?
Yeah, no, what I had heard is that longer calls tend to be higher converting. And I imagine it's more likely that the prospect's going to show up because you might have dug into something actually relevant, like a pain point, and had, you probably made a decent impression. So I didn't know it was 6 minutes, but I had a feeling that it would be longer calls do better.
Yeah. I was surprised actually at 6 minutes. For some reason, I think I either thought it would be 10 to 15.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So you know what's funny? I thought that was long and you're that's short. So that's so funny.
I just thought it was a weird amount. I thought it would either be much shorter, 3 minutes, or much longer. I don't know. 6
Oh, interesting. It's cool to look at the data. I love that you have everything you're sharing is data driven.
Well, I'm very lucky to have friends that work for these companies that are here's our new report. Here's our data.
Yeah. And maybe we'll talk about cold emails next, but I'm loving this deep dive. Cold calling is one of the hottest topics in this space. But for data on emails, do you go to Lavender, or are there other sources? Because I feel like they're an iconic one with they've got some AI tools and they have good data. Have you heard of Lavender?
I have.
Okay.
I use an email plugin. I use two. I use one from a company called Reggie.ai.
Cool.
They have the plugin. It's not core to their product. And then another one from Twain. that's
Oh, cool.
really, really good at picking up on like spam words, spam phrases. We'll talk about this when we get
Okay.
to
Well,
email.
that's a fun little plug though on some
Yes,
tools that
yeah.
people can look into, because I think people are always trying to keep up with the latest tools that could help them
I
be
have a
more
free
effective.
one that I can recommend to people. I'm going to
Okay,
recommend
sure.
it now so we don't forget, because I was such an early user of Lavender that I was at their product hunt, like
Oh,
their
wow.
product hunt launch. And I found Lavender so early because I was using a product called Boomerang, like Australia,
Yeah.
by Baydin, Baydin. And they also have an email, extension that plugs in. It sits on top of Outlook. It sits on top of your G Suite. And it's not as robust as like a Reggie or a Lavender. But if you're just getting started with emails, you frankly probably don't need something that robust. Instead, over 4 categories, it tells you how respondable something is. And so it helps coach you to write emails that reduce the cognitive load for your prospect and like have a clear call to action. But it's free. It's easy to download, and it's not as nuanced as some of the other products. So if you're looking for like a foot in the door, where to start without spending any money, Boomerang by Baydin is your choice.
Wow. And it helps you write emails that keep the customer in mind and try and make it easier for them by reducing their cognitive load, like probably making it easier to digest and respond to.
Totally.
Which is going to increase your chances of getting a meeting. So, okay. So I just want to go back to cold calling to round it out. So you lead with social proof, and then you throw in the crisp value statement. And by about 45 seconds in, you're like, so you've like something, it sounded like some validating statement with a question. Like, you have been handling, your people are overflowing with meetings booked, right? Or like, can you say that part one more time? And then I want to springboard into like how things could evolve and like what types of questions you might ask.
Yeah. So it's the relevant reason for the call is the call opener, and then it's the impact statement. And then before that 45 seconds is up, you want to use some sort of assumptive question that you're pretty sure, you're feeling confident that the answer to it is going to be yes. So I think the example that I gave was something along the lines of like, and Chris, just to be sure, like y'all are using your website to generate leads for your field reps, right?
Cool.
And like there's no reason that you would be reaching out to this person unless you thought that was true in the first place, but you're getting their validation that you got it right. And you're also you're zipping the lip for a sec to give them a chance to speak, maybe give you an objection, but you need to make sure that you don't bulldoze right into the other part without pausing for a second there.
Yeah, because oh shoot, I'm going on another tangent, but it seems like you're big on selling with integrity and not being like sleazy, basically.
I sure try.
So it's like that's such a good example. Like you actually want to give the prospect an out to either throw you an objection or, like hang up on you. And it sounds like too, you're really detached from a mindset perspective. Like you're accepting of whatever may happen, but you actually care about the prospect, it seems, by doing that.
Well, I care about helping. And I have been so gifted in my career to sell all products that I really believe in.
Yeah.
And I know not everybody gets that gift. Like sometimes you take a job and you're like, I got to sell this thing until I can get another job because I need to buy things like, I don't know, eggs that are $17 now and medicine, who knows? So I get that I have been in a pretty privileged position to like truly believe in what I was selling and truly believe that it helps people. But that does make selling easier and more fun because I'm like jazzed when I'm like, oh, I can help you with this.
Yeah. Well, I'm nerding out so much on the nuance of this cold calling stuff. I can't help it. But yeah, just to now, they're going to say something to you with your validating question. And then like, can you just even in theory talk about the types of questions you would ask I'm assuming you're going to try and uncover an actual need, and then how you tie a bow to set the meeting. And then we'll go into like cold emailing, which I'm excited for.
Yeah. Okay. So then the whole like middle here is going to be we're going to operate on the assumption that we're trying to get a meeting in 6 minutes. So we've exhausted at least the first minute now because they have responded. And let's say they responded and they were like, you are correct. Please tell me more. It's never going to happen, but let's go on that assumption. Sometimes, rarely, but sometimes. You are going to want to set up a series of questions that does help you qualify without making it feel like you are interrogating them.
Oh, okay.
So I love a series of open-ended questions, and I love holding my qualifying questions till the end, because I don't want to come out of the gates with being like, so how many leads are you generating? Because that's going to make that zone of resistance come right back up.
You're so good. You're so empathetic.
Like,
it's so subtle.
Oh, thank you. But you can ask really gentle questions like, oh, what does that look like for you? How's that going? Like, does the team find that process is good for them too? Like, what challenges have you faced, or maybe like what has been your favorite part of running a process like that? So you can ask a set of questions that feels generally curious, where you're like I've listened to so many sales calls, like both this type of cold call and also discovery calls. And I find that what really turns people off is when they are asked questions that make them feel like they are being manipulated down a certain path, right?
Yes, I'm asking this question because I want to lead to a pain that I know I can solve and get a meeting with you. If you basically sub-communicate that.
Yeah. So it's a delicate balance to start with questions. I sort of think about it as a funnel, and like, here's kind of the superficial thing they've shared and your real pain points down here at the bottom of the funnel. And so when you're asking your questions, you're asking sort of broad, gentle questions to start, where they then have more control to answer it how they want, to take the conversation in the way that they want. And it doesn't mean that you're off the hook for having shown up like prepared and with your research, that so you can direct the conversation, but you can direct it in a way that doesn't feel manipulative. And at the end, you want to get down to that pain point, the reason that they are willing to explore solving a problem now instead of later. And then once you feel like you have a pretty good pain point, that's when I pivot to more qualifying questions and to setting up the meeting. That's also where I might start testing some trial close questions, which could sound like, hey, Chris, so based on what you've shared, it sounds like pain point is something you really need to get right in the next 6 months. If I could get you on a call with Susan next week so she can walk you through how we did that for ABC fencing and XYZ gutters, would that be a good use of your time? So you're also starting to do trial closes to pull out any objections early instead of waiting till the very end of the call too.
Wow, that's so good. And success leaves clues, or there are patterns between great leaders like yourself and others. Like a guy I just had, Justin J. Johnson. I don't know if you heard of him, but he was the number one Salesforce AE 4 times in a row, multi-time CRO. Yeah, the guy's amazing. And we talked about discovery, and we deep dived. And his whole thing is help AEs make 500K plus, which is pretty epic. And he said, he's like, Chris, what's the number one goal of a meeting? And I said, to qualify if there's an opportunity and whatever, not force it. But he's like, for them to come away saying that it was a good use of their time. And you said, would that be useful? Like, I just noticed that direct alignment. So like there's a lot of wisdom in the subtle phraseology that you use.
I love that. There's this woman called Jill Conrath
Jill, she responded to me. She said no to me.
She's so cool. She's transitioned into working on different non-sales projects.
And
but
by the way, okay, let's be real. This is so funny, but shout out to Jill, because she said no, and she said, you need more female guests. So respect. And Leslie, thank you for being a part of that. And we should talk a little bit about, because I've had so many dudes. So isn't that funny?
That you've had so many dudes. I feel like that's run of the mill and
I know. No, I'm just saying that she said that, and I'm working on changing that. And thank you for being a part of it. So,
well, thank you for giving a heck about changing it. Respect.
Absolutely.
Respect. Okay, wait, but before I lose my train of thought.
Yeah, because we've got so many good trains of thought.
I know.
I'm looking at the time, and we've got like 16 minutes or 15.
Folks, this is also the first time Chris
okay.
and I have ever chatted. So talk about just like, kismet. We were meant to have this conversation.
Oh, it's been so good.
Jill in Snap Selling says that the like litmus test for a good sales meeting is that your prospect would pay we're talking like discovery meeting, like meeting during the middle of the funnel, that your prospect would pay $500 to attend it because you left them with that much value.
Wow.
I'm aspiring to that. I think that maybe there's been some calls where I did that. Definitely during the pandemic when I was selling to CPOs, I was like doing advisory calls and felt great about myself. But I think that is just such a good way to hold ourselves accountable. Like, how am I showing up to this call with the preparation, with the research, with the point of view, with the commercial insights to do everything I can to, to steal Justin's phrase, to like make sure that the prospect walked away really feeling like the call was a good use of their time.
Absolutely. And this call, this conversation has been the most amazing use of our time. And I say our, including the audience. So really appreciate your generosity in sharing on cold calling. That was a clinic. And amazing to hear from someone who's made 250,000 calls and impacted, how many was it? I wrote down 10 million for your team. So now it is a roadmap for the rest of the conversation. Love to dig into cold emailing and any high level insights that you have, the things you think are most impactful, social selling, and then talking about maybe more social topics like diversity, equity, inclusion, and women in tech, which is something we never really talk about on here. And I'd like to change that. So first, cold emailing. Any thoughts on like the importance of cold, maybe start high level, the importance of cold emailing and how we should think about it, and then getting into even like some messaging.
Okay, we only have 15 minutes left, so I'm going to go a little bit higher level on this one.
Okay.
Here's what people need to remember about outreach in general, is that if you are only cold calling, you're never going to be as successful as you can be. If you're only emailing, you're never going to be successful as you can be. So you need to take a multi-channel approach. For my clients who pay me thousands of dollars to give them this advice, always suggest at least 3. So that could be LinkedIn, email, phone. And the reason that a multi-channel approach is so important is because it increases the probability that you find a prospect on their channel of choice. So it is not that you think everybody you're reaching out to loves to be cold called, but some people do. So you're giving them that opportunity to connect with you on their channel of choice. Same for LinkedIn, same for email. So like, please just remember that you said it, Chris, that it's not about us, it's about them. And I think that's especially too with taking a multi-channel approach to outreach. And I mentioned that to start the conversation about email and messaging, because I find when I'm working with reps on messaging that they're putting so much pressure on themselves to make every email perfect. Like every email has to do the most. And that is flawed thinking. It's why we send emails in campaigns and sequences, because you are getting multiple opportunities to tell different stories or tell a story across many emails. And it takes some of the pressure off trying to write an email that says all of the things, because that is going to turn into an email that is dense and unreadable. So when we think about how to write emails that people do read and respond to, 2 big things for folks to keep in mind. There are technical email skills, and then there are actual copywriting skills. And you mentioned Lavender earlier, Chris, and we talked about Boomerang by Baden. I hope people have already downloaded it. I use Reggie, I use Twain. And what a platform like Lavender really helps with is technical copywriting skills. And so those are things like making sure your email is optimized for mobile, making sure you are writing at I personally am for a 5th grade reading level, but generally it's like 3rd to 8th grade, but you're writing short and simple sentences that are easy to digest. You are putting white space between your sentences. You have one clear and concise call to action. And so you're doing all of these things to make it easier visually for the prospect to read your email, because read is actually a very generous term. They're not reading it, they're scanning it. And if it's not easy to scan and digest, it's an immediate delete. So I advise folks when they're thinking about how to write technically proficient emails to follow the 1-10-100 rule. So one and only one clear call to action. Thoughts is not a clear call to action. Saying, you can read this report here if you want. Please let me know if you'd like to schedule a call to talk about this report is not a clear call to action. That's two things. Or do you want them to download the report and read it, or do you want them to follow up and book a call? So one, concise call to action, 10 words to start your emails, because that is the preview text. And we're not even doing obsession over subject lines anymore. The preview text includes your subject line. So if all you do is write a perfect subject line and then you start with, I hope you're well, you've screwed yourself. So one CTA, 10 words, which are your preview text words, which need to be so relevant that your prospect wants to click the email to see more. And then 100 total words. Never write an email that's over 100 words. But those are all, like, technically, you can still write a really shitty email that's irrelevant and have it technically be a 99 on lavender.
Oh, okay. So relevance, does it go back to the cold calling messaging of?
Yes. So that's the other part of sales messaging, which is like the actual copywriting skills. A lot of what I teach, I steal from marketing. And I know you mentioned like the importance of marketing when we talk about, I know it's crazy. They have great ideas. They really struggle to apply them in the sales realm because they don't do the job. So I have really benefited from learning all of their great ways and ideas, and then being able to like iterate them and directly apply to the work we do on the front line selling. And go back to earn the right, look at your emails, and then you ask yourself, what have I put in this email that earns me the right to even ask for this person's attention, that like earns me the right to even ask them to take the time to read it? And so if that email is, my name is, our company does, our features are, here are the generic things we do, we save you time, we save you money, that email is a waste of their time. So instead, you have to really index on like the problems you solve. And later, once you've earned the right, you might have a chance to get on a call with them and talk about how you personally solve those problems. But like generally in your emails, you want to talk about the types of problems you solve, the types of things that are most important to them, the types of outcomes that they crave. And that's going to be what helps you write relevant emails. So it's a combination though, because if you just do relevance, but you write like a multi-paragraph email, you're dead in the water. If you write a technically perfect email, but it's like, hi, my name is Leslie Venetz, I'm your account executive at blah, 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 we sell, the game's over. So really you have to combine both.
Combine the technical prowess with relevance, and you need both. Now, just to wrap up on outbounding before we talk about DEI and women in tech to round out, is there anything you would add to LinkedIn? I'm going to acknowledge that I imagine the messaging is going to be quite similar, right? You've distilled the principles of good messaging across cold call and written communication, but what are some things we need to know about maximizing LinkedIn engagement?
Two things. One is, you do not have to post to be a social seller. I know people really get themselves like worked into a tizzy about feeling like they need to be a creator in order to be an active member of the LinkedIn community. That's not true. You can engage in the comments. Comments are where like the conversations in the community is built, and you can lend value. You can kind of eavesdrop by being present where your prospects are already having conversations about what's important to them. So there's a lot of value to be present on LinkedIn and social sell, even if you're not posting. So that is one thing I would share. And the second thing, Kristen, you already nailed it, is that you are not making brand new messaging for LinkedIn. You're taking what you already created for your email. And if it's a LinkedIn DM, you're maybe making it a little bit shorter. But one of my favorite things about LinkedIn is that you don't have to worry about spam filters, or you don't have to worry about spam filters to the same extent that you do in email. So one of my favorite plays is to do a quad touch on day one, which feels aggressive because it's 4 touches in a single day, but it would be a LinkedIn Connect message. And the LinkedIn Connect message tells them that I also sent an in-mail. And in the in-mail, I am making some sort of deposit. Like I am sharing something very valuable, very relevant to them. Something I'm like 99.9% sure is actually valuable to them. And in that in-mail message, I'm pointing back to the Connect message. So I'm trying to like increase open rates and then increase accept rates. And then I am sending an email that says the exact same thing, but wouldn't have whatever I attached in the in-mail. It might have a PS. It says like, PS, if you'd like the full report, let me know. Something like that. And then I am making a cold call and leaving a voicemail that says the exact same thing. And then my voicemail tells them that I just sent them an email. So all 4 touches are the same message and they're all pointing to each other. And just remember, like, the likelihood that a person gets all 4 touches on the same day, pretty slim. Yeah. They're probably not a buyer if they have enough time to like open and respond to you on all 4 channels in a single day. But that optimizes that channel of choice thinking, where on day 1, it increases the probability that they will encounter one of your touches to increase that awareness and like recognition with your name.
Wow. The quadruple threat. I was telling everyone the triple threat, which was like a connection request, email, and call. But you throw in the in-mail as the 4th, and also like, of course, a voicemail if they don't pick up. So basically the in-mail is the 4th.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Wow. What a great way to round out, outbounding and getting, building awareness and opening up conversations. I have to throw in one final thought though, that I was proud of the other day. Like, I mean, I don't know. It's just a thought on LinkedIn, right? You can see, to your point, you can kind of hover in the comments and see what your prospects are engaging with. And you can bring value to them and kind of serve them and build a little trust. And so I saw Alan, one of the engineering managers at one of my highest potential prospects, shared someone was unemployed for, sharing for reach. And I commented for reach, and it's like, I didn't immediately say, hey, I want to like meet and whatever, but it was just like a little touch point that he might've seen and appreciate, because he did like my comment. And, so like, it's like, we can lift each other up in the LinkedIn comments, and
that's a perfect example.
Yeah. So, okay. We got 3 minutes, and did you have a hard stop? Cause I wanted to dig now into your passion for DI and women in tech, but I just want to check if we need to.
No, let me just.
You were my top meeting today. So,
no, I have another meeting that I still need to prep for, but it's not until 4:45.
Okay. The key is like, I'm just saying if we go a little bit over, because I don't want to do this topic a disservice. So let me know if we're good to.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did you become, passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion? And is there another letter at the end of the acronym?
Sometimes people put a B for belonging.
And okay, belonging, and then women in tech. Can you just talk about like how your journey in this space? And I'm sure it'll kind of unfold.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think all of us want to feel like we belong, right? Like, I think that's a natural human want and need. And the lived experience of not just women, but also like people of color in tech has been that they don't feel a sense of belonging. And I get it. Like, I certainly have experienced that throughout my career, and I turned it into a bit of the fuel that fires me. Like a really perfect example is that early in my career, I was told that there was a way to sell, and it worked. Like, don't get me wrong, it worked, but it made me feel bad. Like, it felt icky to sell that way, that like really high pressure, like I'm going to win, you're going to lose, control. And it's what started me on this path to create Earn the Right, which is the sales philosophy that underpins all of my frameworks and teachings. It's like, it is my business now. But I think some of that narrative came from the fact that like 99% of all of the like frameworks and teaching and way we think about sales and like sales methodologies were all made by white men to be used by white men to sell to white men. So that's not a judgment call. Like some of them are great. Some of them are like foundational to how I sell now, but it is a reality. And it does mean that there was a bit of a silo of thinking of how other people might want to sell or might want to be sold to. And that has been manifested in it, like it being hard to feel like you belong when so often, I think we're seeing less of this now, to be fair, but like so often you join an organization and there's like, here's the way to sell. And it's so very obviously like not the way you want to sell. And I talk to so many of my like white male allies, and even they say like, no, this doesn't serve me. Like, I don't want to be seen as a sales bro. Like, I don't want to like bully people and like peer pressure people into buying. So I think that we're abandoning some of those past narratives. And a lot of that is being helped along by a broader conversation of like DEIB, which helps all of us. Because nobody, like, I know you don't want to be on a phone call like bullying somebody into buying. And so it gives us, I think it gives all of us permission to kind of leave some of those outdated tactics in the past.
I love your earn the right approach. It's just such a good name for it too. And that's an approach that all of us could get behind. And good point of just acknowledging the reality that it's funny to hear, because I am like just a typical white guy, but like all the tactics are created by white guys for white guys to sell to white guys. So it's so good to have a leader like you paving the way with, you know, a really authentic, amazing approach, and setting an example for women out there that you can go into the sales path and absolutely crush it. And I will say, back when I was at Google Cloud, my best manager, one of them was Kristen, or actually Kariston. It's been a while, actually. It's been about 4 or 5 years, and I hope she's doing well. And then we had Lori, our VP, who was just such a good leader. And I noticed that over at Google Cloud, we had some really great female leaders and top performers like Jenna, one of the best sellers out there. So it was good to see that. But I know we still have a long way to go. You know, another on this topic, and we're 2 minutes over, so we'll round out very shortly. But I have a whole program I plugged in the beginning, Tech Sales Accelerator. It helps people land SDR roles at top companies. And I've got a couple new students that are very talented. One comes from retail, one from marketing, looking to get into tech sales, and they both expressed concerns around ageism. And they, you know, and so is that something that you have seen? Because I honestly, I talked to a recruiter out there and she was encouraging about it, but I won't put words in your mouth. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, like, is that an issue you've noticed?
Yes, in a way. I would say the way that I have seen that manifest is that folks really, really regard the SDR role with like some level of sort of spite sometimes. Yeah. Like there's like, I feel like the SDR role, if it was a person, would be like, put some respect on my name. And so what comes from that is that they think that an SDR role should only be done by like somebody that is 19 or you know, like straight out of college, and should only be done for 1 year.
Yeah.
And so I have seen some maybe flavors of ageism in like, well, why would you want to do an SDR job? And frankly, it is like a great job for maybe a parent that's returning to the workforce and doesn't want the stress of like managing people or managing a huge book of business, want something that is a little bit more reliable. Like, go get a job at a company that has a nice inbound workflow and you can do an incredible job like qualifying people and working with your AEs. And at 5 o'clock, you can be out of there. And right?
Yeah. So, because the other thing too, Leslie, is it's like the outcomes are a little more in your control, where like if you have to close $1 million in quota, it's just going to be a lot more pressure if you're an AE, you know, and you have that bag to carry versus an SDR who, you know, like, you know, if you do the right activities and make the touches and apply your messaging concepts and write a technically sound email, you're going to produce some good results. So, but great point about like maybe a parent coming back to the workforce, like that could be a great fit for.
So I think like people should not people applying for jobs, people hiring for jobs should put some respect on the SDR name and realize that it is not an entry level job. It is a ground, like it is a foundational job. It builds the foundation of the entire revenue system in an organization. Like that is first touch point. And if I was hiring, I would want the people making the first touch point with my prospective customers to be folks that I really trusted and maybe had, you know, a little bit of experience, or it was at least a team where there were a few older folks who could take some of the younger folks under their wing and, you know, create that really strong culture of support and collaboration and all of that. And I will say one other thing on the topic of like diversity in sales, because you had shared, and I appreciate this, Chris, but you had shared that you wanted to get more like women on the pod, on the show. And I know when it comes to hiring, folks are often like, we want more women, but we're not sure where to find them or how to attract them. My friend Alexine started this community called Women in Sales. It's a totally free community.
Oh, great.
It's now the largest global community of women in sales. I think it has maybe like 30,000 members, maybe more. But if folks are looking for just a treasure trove of incredible women in sales to invite to speak at their events, to invite to be on their like podcasts and webinars, to hire, I think a community like that's a really good place to start.
So can you say the community one more time? And I want to make sure I link it in the description of the video.
Yeah, it's Women in Sales.
Oh, perfect. And so straightforward. Yeah, because, you know, I had Sally Doobie on and she's great. You know, I don't know if you know Sally Doobie, the Bridge Group, excuse me, long day here. And Trish Bertuzzi is the CEO. And I think, yeah, gosh, I need to check out that group and bring on more guests like yourself. You've been an absolute inspiration. So refreshing to listen to with such like wisdom that from proven experience, and your approach is so nuanced and empathetic, you know? So as we round out, I want to encourage the audience to check you out on LinkedIn, connect with you on socials. I'm pretty sure I can link all those in the description of the video. And I know you advise startups in a specific segment that have a certain amount of revenue to grow their go-to-market. So this is the time, and I just like to plug kind of like any calls to action you have of how people, either like these SDRs and AEs, can connect with you, and also what you do for companies.
Yeah. For any individual contributors, find me on LinkedIn at my name, or I'm on TikTok at Sales Tips Talk if you want more of my unhinged take.
Oh, cool.
But for founders and sales leaders who are like, wow, she really knows what she's talking about, maybe we should reach out. If you are building an outbound motion that you think will account for at least 50% of your net new revenue, and you are over 15 million in revenue, ideally in like professional services or some sort of repeatable revenue business, I'm your gal.
Oh, perfect. Well, I just wanted to wrap up with any final words of encouragement to our audience, and then we'll sign off.
Final words of encouragement. You got this. Like, you have it. You have the capabilities. You have the grit. You have the courage. You have the empathy. You have the curiosity. You have all of that already sitting inside of you. And you're going to be incredibly valuable to whichever organization bets on you.
Leslie, thank you for sharing that. Guys, you've got it. You heard it from Leslie. She is proof of what's possible on this path. And thank you for your time and attention, and for investing in your personal and professional development and your tech sales dreams to your success in tech sales and in life. Happy selling and happy living. And we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you.